This video will be for converting your two-way knit slopers into four-way slopers. So I'm going to take my two-way bottom or hip block and I'm going to trace that off, and I want to trace off the stretchy. So that is the green line. So I traced off my stretchy sloper here, and then I also need to grab off my hip, which is that first line going horizontal across your piece. Should be 8 inches down from your waistline. So trace those two things off, and then we'll go ahead and get started. The next thing we need to do is draw a guideline halfway between the hip and the waist. So again, that should be 8 inches distance. So right at the 4-inch mark, I'm going to square off from center front and mark that across the full width of the piece. From there, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch on either side of that guide. This is going to be the area that we take out. This is our reduction. Next, I'm going to fold these two lines together to take out that center part. Tape that down. Next, at the hip, we are going to take 1/8 of an inch off of our side seam. So measure 1/8 inch in, make a small mark, and then we're going to square up 1/2 inch from the hip. So we want it to be straight right there for that 1/2 inch. So there's my 1/2 inch marking. Next, I'm going to redraw my new hip. So at this point, I'll change over to a red pen so it's a little easier to see where our new hip is. So grab your French curve or your hip curve. We're going to connect this 1/2 inch line that we made over to our waistline. And then since our piece is extended for a full skirt, I'm going to continue to take that 1/8 of an inch off of the full side seam. Okay, and there is my 4-way. So now we have our 4-way stretchy front sloper. I need to do the same steps to my back piece next. Okay, and there is my finished back as well. The next thing I need to do is cut these out, and we are going to grade these down for the super stretchy. So again, we started with our stretchy blocks, and now we're going down to our super stretchy. Okay, now that I have traced off my 4-way knit sloper that we just created onto a new piece of paper, I'm going to grade it for the super stretchy. So we traced off our stretchy, and now we need to grade it in for super stretchy. So the first thing I'm going to do is extend this hip past center front. And then 1/2 inch past center front, I'm going to create a vertical mark. And I'm going to label that C. Now I'm going to grab my 4-way sloper that we created, and I'm going to line up the hip with the hip line on my drawing underneath, and then shift over center front to be even with that marking C. Hip needs to be straight all the way across, so make sure that it's matching on both sides. And then I can trace off my side seam. And my waist. So your waist will be slightly different from the original. Okay, and now you have a graded pattern for stretchy and super stretchy. So you can go ahead and label those or color code them as well. So we've got stretchy on the outside and super stretchy on the inside. So there is my graded 4-way knit for the front. Again, do the same steps for the back piece. And there's my graded back piece for my 4-way knit bottom or hip sloper. Okay, the next thing we will do is create the 4-way slopers for our top pieces. So you need to first draw a vertical line down the center of your piece of paper, and then trace off your front and back, both with the center front and center back touching that line. And again, we're tracing off the stretchy, so that is the green line onto your paper. You will also need to grab the underarm marking. So that is the one that goes to the corner where your armhole and your side seam meet. So I've got that guideline here. The next thing we're going to do is create a guideline just like this one at our shoulder and at our waistline. So we're going to square off from that center line and match our two corners, so our two shoulders. So those two shoulders, if I've got my ruler perfectly straight here in the center, those two shoulders should both meet the top of my ruler. Create a line there. And then for the waist, we're going to do it at the top of this curve. So you've got a higher point on the curve and then it curves down for the waist. We're going to square off from the top of that. And again, make sure that your ruler is lined up straight with that center line. touching the top of that curve, and we'll square off from there. Now our 2 reduction areas are going to be in between these guidelines. So I'll have 1 reduction area here and 1 down here. So I need to find the midway between both of those. So between my shoulder and my underarm, I'm going to measure between those 2. My measurement is 6 3/4. So my halfway is 3 3/8. So I'm going to make a little marking there. And then halfway between my underarm and my waist, that's 8 1/2. So 4 1/4, I'm going to put a marking there. For this one, we don't have any reference points. We're not matching up the shoulders or anything. So I like to use my L square for this one so that I know I am going perfectly straight. Okay, once I've got my guides, now from the top one, I'm going to create lines 1/4 inch on either side. So 1/4 inch above and 1/4 inch below that guideline. And that will be the area that we're taking out. And now from the bottom one that's closer to our waistline, we're going to take 1/2 inch on either side. So we did 1/4 for this one. The second one will be 1/2 inch. And again, that will be our reduction area. Now I'm ready to fold my lines together to take out those reductions. Okay, now I'm ready to true my sides. So take your ruler, match up that underarm to your waistline, and draw your new side seam. And then you're going to use your French curve to true that difference on your armhole. Okay, and this is your 4-way knit sloper for the stretchy fabric. We're going to cut these apart and then grade them for super stretchy. Okay, now that I've got my sloper for the stretchy fabric done, I need to grade this for the very stretchy. So I went ahead and traced it off onto a new piece of fabric or piece of paper. And then just like we did with our back pieces or our bottom pieces, we're going to extend this guideline. So I traced off the guideline at that underarm. Extend it out on the beyond center front. And then we're going to create 2 guidelines here that are 1/4 inch apart. So the first 1/4 inch, so 1/4 inch away from center front, I'm going to make a little line, label that C2, and then 1/2 inch away from center front, make another line, and that's going to be C. Okay, now I need to grab my front piece, excuse me, and I'm going to trace off different portions of this using those 2 different markings. So the first one we're going to do is placing our center front on C2, so that first line that we made, and then matching up that underarm guide through the full piece. Okay, while our piece is there, I'm going to trace off my shoulder area. So this is our notch. You're gonna go from this midpoint, so not from the notch, but from this midpoint, this chest measurement that we did, our midpoint between our shoulder and our underarm. From there, I'm going to trace off my armhole. Ooh, got a little bit off there. And then just square off your corner a little bit. So just kind of get that corner, but not the full shoulder. Okay, so that's the portion that I just traced off. Now I'm going to move that center front to that next marking, the C. Line up my full underarm through the whole piece. And now we're going to trace off our side seam and our waist. So I'm just getting the corner of my armhole there, and then get your full waistline over to center front. Okay, so full waistline, side seam, and then I just did the little corner of my armhole. Now I'm going to use my French curve to combine those 2 curves here. Okay, the next thing we need to do is draw our new shoulder line. So from that corner that we just marked over to the corner of our neckline, we'll draw in our new shoulder. Okay, and then that is our stretchy and very stretchy sloper for 4-way. So I can label that stretchy is the outside one, and then the inside one is our super stretchy. Okay. Okay, now do the same process to your back piece. Okay, and there is my finished back four-way sloper. Whoops, one thing I forgot was my shoulder. Now it will be finished. There we go.